Hi guys, so the next book is My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future by Indra Nooyi, former chairman and CEO, PepsiCo. This is the book. I have to stop calling these reviews because I'm not really reviewing, I'm just sharing what I like about each book. And basically I'm just reading off of the book and sharing what I like. So on this one, I'm going to read from chapter 1, just 2 paragraphs. Family, I learned from the very beginning, is fundamental to our lives on this planet. It is both my foundation and the force that has propelled me. The family that I created in the US with my husband, Raj, and my 2 daughters, Krita and Tara, is my proudest achievement. I belong to an Indian family of a particular era and am defined by this heritage, but I know that family comes in every form. We thrive, individually and collectively, when we have deep connections with our parents and children, and within larger groups, whether we are related or not. I believe that healthy families are the root of healthy societies. I know family is messy, with painful issues that can't be reconciled. I had 29 first cousins, 14 from my mother's side, whom I was very close to, and 15 from my father's side, many of whom I barely knew because of historical rifts I cannot begin to fathom. I think these situations are a microcosm of what the rest of life is like, and they teach us about the difficulties that we must navigate and accept. That's the part that I like from that chapter. And now, I don't know, guys, I'm debating if I should read the whole chapter 5 because a lot of what I like about this book is captured on that chapter. So let's see how long it takes me. Hopefully not 20 minutes, but let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go. Chapter 5. For the next 3 months, I recovered from a car crash that crushed some bones in my hips and left me covered in cuts. I had internal bleeding, whiplash, and a concussion. In that first week, Raj went to the police station to retrieve my belongings, and when the cop showed him my mangled red car, his legs buckled under him. The car had no airbags. The driver's side was completely crumpled. My leather briefcase on the floor in the back was smashed. It's a miracle that I survived. The doctors at the Kankakee Hospital, sensing internal bleeding, wanted to remove one of my kidneys, but Raj's uncle advised against it and had me moved to his bigger hospital in Hazel Crest, Illinois. The nurses later told me that he checked in every hour and one night showed up in his pajamas to treat the excruciating muscle spasm in my neck and back. The rest of the family flocked in again. Chandrika was working on an assignment in Puerto Rico and came immediately to Chicago. Nandu arrived from New Haven. Raj was there around the clock. When my mother brought 2-year-old Frida to the hospital, my child lay down next to me crying and wouldn't leave my side. So afraid of seeing me connected to tubes in a strange room and bed. I went home to the apartment after a few weeks and my family took care of me. Day after day. I had physical therapy. The concussion meant I had to relearn some people's names, and I couldn't watch TV or read much. I was told I couldn't have another child for a few years because of the internal injuries. Surprisingly, I took this news very calmly. I was so glad to have Frida, and her chatter lifted me. The intense rest I needed to heal forced me to slow down in a way I hadn't before. I slept a lot, and on good days, I was eager to get back to work. On bad days, I was happy to be alive and intact. The accident was my fault because I had driven into the intersection without seeing the oncoming car. The signage at the crossing was very poor, as the police officer later noted in my court appearance. He'd seen many other accidents right there. Once again, BCG stepped up when it mattered by paying my salary throughout this ordeal. We also had excellent health insurance through the company, and I don't know what we'd have done without it. But the time away from work made me reassess my priorities. I had a daughter now, and the endless travel and long hours no longer felt exciting. I wanted to be close to home. Meanwhile, an executive recruiter kept calling, pressing me to consider a job in the automotive electronics division of Motorola. Finally, I shuffled into that company's Schaumburg, Illinois headquarters for an interview pushing a four-legged aluminum walker. Cars and trucks in the 1980s were being transformed from heavy steel mechanical beasts to the lighter weight computer-guided machines we drive today. Motorola, a major player in developing two-way radios, pagers, semiconductors, cell phones, and satellites for government use, was inventing new systems for vehicles, from electronics for engine controls and anti-lock braking to intelligent navigation systems. The person running the automotive electronics division was Gerard Schulmeyer, a German engineer and businessman who'd worked at Braun, Gillette, and Sony in Europe and had an MBA from MIT. Gerard was rumored to be tough as nails. He needed a new head of strategy, someone to help him think through how Motorola's vast resources could radically upgrade personal transportation. I knew Gerard was a force the moment I met him. The interview was all substance, not about electronics or cars, but about my thought process as a business strategist. How do I go understanding what drives an industry I know nothing about? How do I keep current in the world of strategy? How extensive is my network of contacts? I like Gerard. He had an incredible ability to paint a picture of the future in words. He just wanted to know if we were a good fit. Shortly after the meeting, Motorola made me an offer. I was surprised at how fast all this had happened and started to waver on whether I should pull the plug on BCG and consulting, which I so dearly loved. So I co-opted Raj to help me make a decision. We went to dinner with Gerard and his smart and cheerful wife, Helga. The warmth and give and take between the two of them made a real impression on us. When we got home, Raj told me that if I really wanted to leave BCG and work for someone who didn't care whether I was male, female, immigrant, mother, or whatever, someone who just cared about my brains, I should work for Gerard. All he'll care about is results, he said. I took the job. I worked with Gerard on and off for the next 8 years. He was my teacher, coach, critic, and supporter, and nourished my career with wisdom and care for my family that was fundamental to my ascent and ability to become a CEO. He taught me to simplify complex problems and to communicate them effectively, and he looked out for opportunities for me. He once sent me to teach a class at MIT when the university wanted him. Yet again, I had the good luck of a boss who was a mentor, advocate, and friend. In return, I put in very long hours. My loyalty to him was unwavering. In late 1986, still walking with a funny limp, I began commuting by car every morning from our downtown Chicago home to Motorola, about 30 miles away. A few weeks later, my mother told us that she just didn't want to face another Chicago winter with months of frigid winds and below freezing temperatures. The gently falling snow could be beautiful, she said, but she was feeling cooped up and really wanted to return to India for several months. Raj and I fully understood. We bought her the plane ticket. Krita wasn't happy about it. And then we had no childcare. While Amma lived with us through my pregnancy as we adjusted to parenthood and as I recovered from the terrible car accident, I had never once worried about Krita being safe and loved. I didn't worry about her food or clothing or whether she was being truly cared for. She was read to, talked to, picked up, encouraged, and signed up for baby classes. I was always in touch with my mother and knew the details of their days. Our daughter lived in the center of a full devoted community. But now, for one cold dark season at least, Raj and I were on our own, and the next 5 months drove home how difficult it was for two working parents with young children to cope in an environment where quality, affordable childcare is not ubiquitous and where support systems for working families are completely lacking. First, we put the word out to relatives, friends, and neighbors that we were looking for a caregiver and interviewed a few people. Like so many other parents, though, we didn't meet someone we trusted and connected with, and the whole prospect of a high-end, well-trained nanny was very expensive. Then, thankfully, a woman named Vasanta, whom we'd met a few times at Indian music concerts, offered to help. She lived with her husband, three daughters, and one son, all teenagers, in a house in Oak Park, Illinois, about 20 minutes from our apartment and on the route to Raj's office. She would take Preeta every morning, she said, and either of us could get her on our way home. One absolute blessing of this arrangement, I know in retrospect, was that Basanta let us pick up the baby any time in the evening. So every morning, 6:30, we dressed Preeta in her full-body snowsuit, hat, mittens, and boots, and packed her bag of diapers, extra clothes, toys, creams, and little snacks. Then Raj carried her by 7 a.m. down the street to his car through the Chicago winter. He buckled her into her car seat and drove her to Oak Park. In the evenings, it was often Raj who went back to Vasanta's house, making his way through the snowbanks to the front door. I was less available to pick Frida up because in my first year at Motorola, I had to travel to Phoenix fairly often to work with the Chicago-based executives who had their winter head office in Arizona. I remember a few episodes when I was stuck in a plane on the tarmac at O'Hare Airport, panicked that I was late on my night to get my little daughter. Sometimes I didn't make it to Vasanta's house until 9 or 10 p.m. Frida loved Vasanta, but the early morning drives and the cold and the late nights pickups wore on her. Some mornings she just refused to leave the house and threw tantrums. The winter was not our most shining moment. Ouch. By spring, Raj and I were exhausted with it all. Something had to change. We chose to move back to Glen Ellyn, into a 4-bedroom house with a semi-finished basement, a front porch, and a double garage near a park at Montessori School. The new house, in a brand new development, was much closer to my office and had space for live-in help in addition to visiting family. Our suburban American life began for a second time, now with furniture in almost every room and a lively 3-year-old girl. She loved to explore the nooks and corners and many stairs in the house and to splash in the bathtub. She had a couple of friends across the street, Mark and David, and they watched a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on TV. I never really understood this show, but Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Leonardo, the 4 main characters, became my new best friends. Raj and I also asked our parents, uncles, and aunts to India whether any of them could take off and come to the US to help us with Preeta. Some agreed, and then we had to reschedule them. Some agreed, then we had to schedule them. We used a large full-year calendar and worked months ahead to sort out all the travel times and tickets, as well as the visas and support documents everyone needed to get into the US and then go back. For the next few years, my mother, in-laws, and relatives alternated living with us. Occasionally, we also hired a local babysitter to help get Preeta ready for her preschool classes, assist in cooking, and do some housework. In the evenings, Raj and I took over. We still didn't have a social life. Our neighbors were friendly but hustling to keep their work and family lives on track too. The Indian relatives each came for 2 or 3 months. They slept in a bright bedroom with an attached bathroom on the main floor and chipped in for Preeta's needs and activities. Frankly, they watched a lot of TV and didn't go anywhere except on weekends when we showed them around Chicago or drove them to the mall or the movies. They struggled a bit in the quiet of suburbia, missing guests popping in and the bustle of home. We bought them each a Visit USA airline ticket, a deal for foreign visitors to fly around the country and see the sights. But no one used it. They came to Glen Ellyn just to be with us. The men had decent mid-level jobs in government in India and had never taken much vacation, so they had paid time off to make the trip. Their wives hadn't worked outside their homes and didn't have many commitments of their own. Helping our growing family was viewed both as an intergenerational responsibility and a joy. They felt vested in our success. Crucially for me, they rejected the traditional Indian notion that the woman in the family, even if she earned money outside the house, was also responsible for keeping everyone fed, clothed, clean, and content. If I came home from work tired, they'll tell me to rest. I had stuck with my job, as Raj's father urged me to do after our wedding, and they were very proud of me. I was an educated, energetic woman making tracks in American business, and they talked about my career with their friends and acquaintances in India. Nooyi is a small village near Mangalore, and my in laws loved that I carried the name in my pursuits in the US and put their tiny town on the map. We didn't pay the visiting relatives or my mother for their help. Raj and I paid for everything in my mother's life when she lived with us, but didn't give her a salary for the childcare, cooking, cleaning, and thousands of other small tasks she did to keep our household going over the years. Had we suggested we pay her, she would have been insulted. Even though Raj and I juggled, worried, bickered, and coped during the one winter when we drove Krita to the in-home childcare, I know our problems were pretty simple. The arrangement was short-lived, and we had secure jobs and a healthy child. Otherwise, when our children were small, Raj and I were very fortunate to be able to rely on a care ecosystem made up of extended families supported by household help to let our own little family flourish. And of course, we could keep advancing in our careers. But what of the millions of families who don't have this luxury? The travails of working parents who do this dance every day for years through snowstorms, but also through job loss, divorce, illness, and the millions of other hurdles we all face make me wonder why accessible, affordable, quality childcare isn't a national priority. Should I keep going, guys? This is like at 18 minutes at this point. Oh my gosh. Am I gonna be copyrighted? Okay, let me just keep going. The trusted care I had at home let me dive into my job at Motorola. In my first week, I sat down in my new office in the old automotive electronics building to read about the recent strategy work, and I soon figured out that Gerard had burned through 3 or 4 chief strategists in the 18 months before me. Not a good sign. I asked the head of HR about it. Yeah, that's because Gerard is impossible to work with, he said. He has an idea a minute and no one can keep up with him. We're hoping you'll last. This was essential knowledge. Gerard needed me to run fast with him and to help push his vision within the organization. He started stopping by my office every morning with new musings, and I started putting each into one of 3 buckets. 1, worth working on right away. 2, fine to take a few weeks to get to it. 3, not worth pursuing. Over time, I reordered the list, and he saw progress. He never questioned my judgment on how and why I had prioritized his ideas. Gerard hired me, a total outsider, because I had been exposed to so many different industries and could apply a strategic framework to understand what drives value in a business. I was outspoken and willing to challenge the status quo. Still, I knew nothing about cars and electronics, so I had 2 community college professors come twice a week to my office for lessons. One on how automobiles work, and the other on solid-state physics and electronics. What is a microprocessor? What is a semiconductor? What are electronic engine controls? What is a transmission? What is a carburetor? Without this extra training, I couldn't have succeeded. I had to establish myself as a curious and quick study who understood Motorola's whole portfolio, especially automotive electronics. The company, founded in Chicago in 1928, was the first to develop car radios, hence the motor and the Ola, a typical 1920s suffix indicating sound. 6 decades later, Motorola was loaded with brilliant minds, helping lead the technology revolution. They worked with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to build the radios that Neil Armstrong speak to the world from the moon. They designed and built microprocessors and semiconductors to power computers built by Apple and others. They invented the first handheld portable telephone in 1971. When I arrived, the phone had become the Dynatac 8000, the first commercially viable mobile phone. It was $3,995, book-sized device with a 30-minute battery life, and I was very proud of the one I got as a Motorola employee. I wore a pager on the waistband of my skirt, too, since executives like me certainly needed to be buzzed at any time. It was a sign of importance, even if the only people who buzzed you were family and friends. It's almost done. Okay. For 2 years, I worked with Gerard to reposition the automotive electronics division for sustained growth. Then, at his suggestion, I was asked by the CEO's office to lead a company-wide project we called Control and Communications for People and Machines on the Move. We had 3 task forces to examine how technology might move with a person through the day: car of the future, truck of the future, and home of the future. We were to examine how people could transition seamlessly between a technologically advanced home and a car or truck to make life more convenient and connected. I love the mandate and the far-reaching nature of the assignment. I got a generous budget and assembled a team of several Motorola executives and 7 MBA students who took a semester off to work on the project. We had so many ideas about how technology could and would shape our future. Dashboards with integrated entertainment and navigation, built-in mobile phones, remote management of a home from the car, the list went on and on. We had to think about how Motorola should craft investment strategies for years to come. The highlights was a day-long meeting with 10 senior executives who said they were eager to cooperate across divisions and bring our conclusions to life. Personally, it was fulfilling to see my work so welcome. In late 1988, all of 33 years old, I was promoted to the Director of Corporate Strategy and Planning for Motorola. I started working with the CEO's office and felt included in that inner circle. Chris Galvin, who was in charge of corporate functions and later became CEO, advocated for me to get the Vice President title, a rarity for a woman in the company. I moved into an office on the 6th floor of the big brown brick and glass headquarters building. This job came with a car and an indoor parking spot, a bonus because I could stop scraping the ice and snow off my windshield every winter night before driving home. I got a small raise, but I wasn't thinking about the money. I was excited to take on a bigger role. My job was to rejuvenate corporate strategy, an underappreciated function in Motorola's executive branch. I hired a half-dozen people, including former colleagues from BCG and other parts of Motorola, and threw myself into the work. I loved managing people and explaining how we could grow Motorola and take on the agile companies in Silicon Valley. As a leader, I could be very blunt in my drive to make sure we made all the right decisions. In some meetings, I would comment on plans directly and sometimes point out why I thought a unit strategy wouldn't work. Your strategy makes no sense, I'd say. There's no way you can deliver the return you have assumed in your financial model. This wasn't popular or effective. At some point, George Fisher, the CEO, noted my style and pulled me aside. "Be careful about throwing hand grenades," he said. "You may turn people off even though you mean well." George coached me to take a different tack by saying, for example, "Help me understand how this comes together. As I see it, this technology platform requires a lot of investment and patience. Is it prudent to factor in a quick return?" Much as I hated this new, softer way of asking questions, I found it got results. I appreciated how George spoke to me, one-on-one, straight, and in a constructive tone. Overall, good lessons. Still, after a while, dealing with complicated, top-heavy CEO's office, multiple division presidents, and other well-meaning managers who believed they too needed to influence Motorola's corporate strategy and planning made day-to-day work tedious. I figured out how to get stuff done in my strategy job by working through people who had informal power, but that seemed unnecessarily time-consuming. One day, in late 1989, Gerard called me to say he was leaving Motorola. He'd accepted a job in Zurich at ASCA Brown Boveri, ABB, an ambitious new company formed by the recent merger of ACAB of Sweden and BBC Brown Boveri of Switzerland. ABB would compete with General Electric, Mitsubishi, and others to be the world's most important maker of heavy electrical equipment, including power generation and transmission, equipment, and industrial controls. Gerard would commute to Switzerland. For now, Helga would stay in Chicago with their 3 children. I was disappointed but not surprised. Gerard had started running Motorola's European business a few months earlier, and I knew the global product divisions didn't like his direct style and were uncooperative. He was frustrated and heading to a greener pastures. Heading on to greener pastures. Under his tutelage, I had grown enormously. I wished him very well and promised to stay in touch, but I knew I'd miss him a lot. Meanwhile, at headquarters, the corporate strategy team was asked to take on a huge new endeavor, a complete portfolio analysis of every Motorola business. We worked day and night to examine the company's advantages and disadvantages, which segments should we invest in, and which long-term technology bets made the most sense. I found that all that earlier of the future work was paying off. We had some great ideas to shoot for. After almost a year, my team gave a 6-hour presentation to the company's senior management, a top-to-bottom review with a clear plan of action. I was very proud of it all. It was the biggest and most comprehensive work I'd ever done. The discussion was exciting and revealing. Everyone was complimentary, and the top brass said they'd get back to us in a few weeks with ideas on how to move ahead. Gerard called again. He'd arrived in Zurich and soon decided he wanted me to come to ABB. I told him that under no circumstances would I come to Zurich or start an international commute. Okay, he said he understood that, but since I wouldn't do the job, would I please help him find someone who could help him? He'd already asked his executive recruiter to find him an Indra Nooyi. The recruiter had no idea what that meant and had to call me to create the job description. I agreed to help and started vetting candidates. I even went to London just to meet 4 or 5 potential new strategists at Gerard's behest. I'm sure they were puzzled as to why someone from Motorola was interviewing them for a job at ABB. But that didn't matter. Gerard rejected them all. His secretary in Zurich also called me often when she was trying to figure out Gerard's requests. We joked that I was her Gerard interpreter. I helped her through her early days. Several more months went by. I was waiting for some direction on the next steps related to my portfolio analysis, but the Motorola bosses kept telling me to be patient. In the evenings, Raj started to hear me complain and for the first time saw me struggling with anxiety. It was an unusual situation for him and for me. I was normally so determined, but now I was frustrated. Given the culture of Motorola, maybe I should have known that big decisions about the company's entire future would be slow and careful. But I was impatient and stressed, and I didn't know whether my impatience was and is a vice or a virtue. Gerard called yet again. ABB had been on a buying spree, he said, and had soaked up hundreds of smaller engineering and equipment manufacturing companies around the world. The company had grown to 200,000 employees and sales of about $20 billion a year. Now ABB was taking over Combustion Engineering, a company based in Stamford, Connecticut, that made power generation systems and other industrial equipment. Gerard was adding the company's U.S. operations to his job. He'd oversee about 1/3 of ABB. He and Helga were moving to Connecticut. Would I come too? Raj, at this time, was doing exceedingly well at Hewlett-Packard. He was happy in his job as a sales executive, and he was among the early winners of the company's President's Club Award, an accolade given to the top 0.1% of sales executives. He worked with people he viewed as close friends. He loved the business and environment. Frida was settled in her Montessori school in Glen Elwyn. We were both home most evenings at a reasonable hour, ate dinner together, played with our growing daughter, and read books to her. Some weekends, Raj took her to the Morton Arboretum, where they bonded over birds, trees, and flowers. Other weekends, we went to the Science Museum or the Shedd Aquarium in downtown Chicago. Our life was stable and fun. The trees we had planted in the yard were growing bigger. Yes, I was frustrated at work, but there was so much equilibrium in our lives. Still, Gerard didn't stop. After talking to me, he reached out to Raj about the Connecticut plan and mapped out all the reasons why we should move: proximity to New York and my sister, better schools, lovely homes, more pay, an action oriented boss, and company. He was quite the salesman. Raj took the call and listened patiently, a real tribute to the prince of a man he is. One night, Raj asked me if I thought anything was going to happen with my Motorola portfolio analysis. I told him it didn't look good. The problem lay in the structure of Motorola's leadership. The presidents of each division ultimately had far more say than I did over these decisions, and the CEO's office had to build consensus with them for major strategy decisions. My department was always going to be a sounding board, but our recommendations might take years to implement. How fresh would they be in the fast-moving tech world? Okay, Raj said, then let's move. I want you to be happy, and it's clear you are not. That my husband placed my happiness and career at the center of this discussion was touching indeed. He had clearly thought it through, and he was willing to have his wife and daughter move across the country while he stayed in Chicago and followed us later. God knows when. He knew he'd have to switch jobs in HP or move to another company. He was willing to make sure that I was fulfilled. Raj's selflessness is all the more remarkable because he was taking on the conventions of the time in so many ways. He was an ambitious, educated man in his 30s, on his own corporate climb, with great financial and management prospects. He was also an Indian immigrant in the US, bound by both the behavioral expectations of his family and friends back home, and by the men he was getting to know in this new country. With this choice to change his life for the sake of my career, he was contesting all of that. His courage and devotion to me and to his family is why I adore him and view him as the best thing that ever happened to me. When I decided to quit Motorola, Chris, whose grandfather had founded the company and whose father had been CEO, was visibly upset. He came to our house one weekend morning to convince me to stay. His most compelling argument was that I shouldn't leave an institution, Motorola, for an individual, Gerard. I told him I didn't want to leave, but I didn't feel like I was having an impact. All I wanted was to see the results of my work. Wow, that is a long-ass video, 30 something minutes, guys. Not gonna say anything else. That's it. Get this book. Read it. Let me know how you like it. Bye.